So now I've got a much more, let's say, aggressive rear pad. I've got much more modulation on the front. I don't need the help of the front sway bar any longer. So, okay, let's go ahead and take that out. Let's balance a little bit of rear spring with it. Now we've got some more options. Let's get a little bit lower with the car, whatever.
Green flag, green flag.
Welcome to the Blind Apex Podcast, where amateur club racers tune in to get faster.
This episode is brought to you by DeechWorks Fuel Systems. Visit DeechWorks.com to fuel your passion. On this episode of the Blind Apex Podcast, we need to talk about when to get professional race car engineering help, specifically with the suspension, but everything's sort of interconnected. So let's see where this goes. Joining me, I stalked him on the internet, y'all. Former Maryland Terrapin Formula SAE nerd, engineer by trade, over a decade tuning motorsport suspension, trackside and on the bench, owner of 057 Motorsports, Bryan Hise. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thanks for having me.
I got all that right. I stalked you correctly on the internet.
You did, although I would say it's closer to 2 decades of suspension tuning.
Yeah, I mean, when I went through your bio on LinkedIn, I was like, oh, okay. And then I was just typing away. For those people who leave their profiles open, some people don't.
Yeah.
It gets kind of hard. But so let's talk about your background and experience in the motorsports world and how you sort of got where you are.
Yeah. I think, I'm dating myself, but then again, I said 2 decades, right? So I've been at it a minute. I was, a kid in the 80s, and I still recall coming out of McDonald's, had my Happy Meal, 1985 Nissan 300ZX with the pop-up headlights. Guys getting into his car, turns it on, the lights come up. I'm like blown away,
Right.
and that was the first moment I kind of remember, like, I want to know how that works. And,
Yeah.
just since then, I mean, middle school and high school and stuff, like I'm just, I'm buying Carol Smith books. There's no YouTube then, you're just reading. And there was a speed shop up the road from my parents' place in Maryland, TPC Racing. And, me and my buddies always drive by there. I thought it was the coolest thing. And, went to engineering school to learn how cars worked. Ended up, getting into the motorsports industry from there. Um, Went to TPC, worked there for a little bit, worked for JRZ suspension engineering for about 10 years. Um, Came to Illinois, worked at Porsche Restoration Shop, also Motorsports. They do fantastic work. From there, I left and wanted to focus a little bit more just on like product design, engineering, just kind of flex that creative muscle. So I went to AMS Performance, and that's when I started 057, because at that point I was kind of like, I wanted a little bit of a career change, wanted to do something fresh, but my phone was still ringing. So I created 057, and things just kind of started to take off from there as far as the projects we're working on now. But, it's always been involved with JRZ in some capacity, selling, servicing, working with a lot of racers. And I think one of the things that I really appreciated about that part of my career is the amount of repetitions I got,
Mm-hmm.
with all of these different clients, different kinds of cars, levels of experience, levels of racing, um, and understanding, as people kind of go through the sport, you can look at it from a perspective of, there's a lot of guys. I mean, heck, look at like Randy Pobst, right?
Right.
And he's starting out in, these amateur levels, and he's coming up, and he's an accomplished professional and a wonderful guy, and all the things he's learned. And you watch people on these trajectories, and you get to, be with them through those experiences, and, kind of learn what they need, what they relate to, what the car needs, through those different phases of development. So it's just been for me, very educational in where I saw opportunity to help people
Hmm.
and, where I could kind of make an impact in what I'm doing. Um, so I think that kind of brings us to today.
Yeah. I I find it interesting that what was the first place in Maryland, that little Maryland shop you were like?
TPC Racing?
Yeah, is that the place that was like outside of Andrews Air Force Base, or one of the?
No,
Was it
they were in Jessup, Maryland.
okay?
So it was kind of like right in between Baltimore and DC.
Okay,
Um, but they kind of started out, they started out as like a hot rod tuning shop kind of thing, like a gas station. And
okay,
the owner got into Porsche, and the rest is history. He was making turbo kits, building race cars. He raced professionally. Randy drove with him. Those guys had a lot of success, winning Daytona in the 24 hour and that kind of thing. And since then, he's built the business up. He's got a kind of a adjacent company in DSC Sport where he's doing really cool stuff, kind of tuning um the digital side of shocks, which is,
hmm,
for me, another fascinating aspect of the industry right now, but still very kind of centered around, Porsche performance. Of course, at DSC, they're doing lots of different makes and models. Um, but, it was one of those things I recall reading in the Race Car Engineering magazine how many years ago. It was a interview with Ross Brawn when he was at Ferrari.
hmm,
And he was advising, a lot of the younger engineers to go work for a GT team, right? Get under the car,
right,
touch the thing, get out of the trailer, get out of the computer lab, get out of the sim lab, and, put your hands on the car, talk to the mechanics, talk to the driver, look at how the thing works, go out to the track, watch it work. And I think that, Michael, the owner at TPC, certainly has that philosophy. He'd get out of a practice session at a pro race, throw his driver suit off and go take the transmission out and rebuild the diff himself.
right.
He kind of, you had that whole view of, making an impact on the stopwatch and then the on the leaderboard. Um, I don't recall exactly where I'm going with this, but
Yeah, but engineers that get their hands dirty. I just had I don't say just, it's probably 3 or 4 months old now. I talked with one of the Virginia Tech Hokies Formula SAE teams, and they find it invaluable as an engineering student to work on the car. And those are the engineers the mechanics don't curse, right? Because
100%. You have to design your stuff and then figure out by yourself why it doesn't work, or it sucks to work on, or it's hard to machine. And, so many
yeah,
engineers don't get their hands dirty. And it's, I think sometimes you grow up as a technical person and you see things from that one perspective, and that's what you're good at. It's what you're gravitating to. So you go and you work down that path, but it's easy, I think, at that stage to ignore, the more practical side. And what makes you a really good engineer, I love Formula SAE kids, the people that have gone on professionally, the students there, you get that hands-on experience. You kind of understand much better, even from just a practicality standpoint, like what's achievable, even if you don't go into motorsports. You've done it yourself, kind of soup to nuts of all right, I want to do this. Here's how I'm going to try to do it. All right, I did it. How'd it work out? Okay, that was good. Next time I'm going to do it this way.
hmm. So let's talk a little bit about your overall philosophy on suspension tuning at the amateur level, because this podcast has gotten into some more, we've at least brushed on topics that are more advanced than the cookie cutter stuff you see online, right? So most folks will go on the internet and ask questions, right? You and I are probably similar in age, right? We grew up in the 80s mostly, and um I we didn't have the internet. So you would ask somebody, they'd kind of give you some of the answer, right? But at this point in time, most of the major chassis are, I won't say major, most of the older chassis are pretty figured out. You can find the cookie cutter stuff online. You can call the company and you can say, hey, I want XYZ, and they'll make it for you. It's on the shelf already, you know.
Yeah.
But we're coming to an age, I come from the Honda world, but we're coming to an age, in my opinion, where there was sort of a dead spot in performance cars. Not like the traditional ones. Not Porsche didn't make crappy cars, right? The Corvette was never really bad, okay? But when you're talking about taking a grocery getter and turning it into a race car at the amateur level, there was sort of a dead spot in the early 2000s, right? At least in the Honda world. And now we're sort of going, okay, well, there's one last double wishbone Honda, or this McPherson Honda or whatever isn't as crappy as they say it should be, right? Or there's other, like the Nissan Sentra has been a McPherson strut car forever, you know? But we're looking at these newer cars, and newer cars are more affordable. We're getting our hands on newer race cars faster. Everybody's shopping Copart. They buy a wrecked car, they're building their next race car, right? So the newer cars are coming out, and we're actually getting our hands on cars before the companies have a chance to really put a lot of time in on them. So what are your opinions on sticking to motion ratios, doing kinematics and things like that?
I think a lot of the basic work is highly valuable, right? Like, you go back to Formula SAE, for example. It's a great exercise, right? One of the things that taught me a lot was, doing like a 7 degree of freedom, just like a mathematical model of the car,
Mm-hmm.
correlating that up the shaker rig, and then running all these shock adjustments through it, all these spring rates, and seeing what the responses are. Developing damper curves based off of that, seeing how that works on the track and not. Um, and I think that one of the things, you weigh that against, kind of a practical, empirical approach where it's you go out to the track, you're talking to the driver, stand at the flag stand and watch the thing work, right? Don't even go bother with squiggly lines yet. Is this thing rolling over? Is it on the front? Is it on the rear? Is it flopping around? Is it skipping off the bumps? Like you can see a lot of that, just by putting your eyes on it. Um, so I think that both approaches are valid, and I think that to me, the process of iterating through it, collecting information and making improvements is just as important. I think that there's, similar to like the student that doesn't do Formula SAE, right? Like they're stuck in the simulation lab, and that's how they understand the world, but they don't know how to design a part that works, right? That the mechanics won't throw a wrench at them for.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go and you can do your motion ratios and you can calculate your natural frequencies. Um, and you can measure some of the kinematics, but do you have tire data? Do you have an aero map for the car? Do you know how to match those two things with what your driving habits and capabilities are? Because that's a different, tier to the recipe. I think that, when we talked on the phone a couple of days ago, we talked about like a spec car, at the pro level, where you could have pretty dramatically different just base spring rates and very good drivers in both cars doing very similar lap times at the top of the field.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at that result and you can throw the motion ratio calculation out of the window. Well, I think 3 hertz is the best. I want 2.5. I want 1.5.
Right.
It's got to be 4 because it's an aero car. And you're like, all right, well, this NASCAR guy came and put these ultra soft springs and this real elaborate bump stop and packer package on, and he's just dusting you. So calculate that part. Not that any of that work is invalid, but I think the application of the work is the important part. And to me, making a car fast, like that loop that I'm going to make my assumptions, I'm going to weigh them, against the performance, I'm gonna make a different decision to move forward again. Like that's anybody can do that, right? Like you don't have to, you don't have to have a degree, you don't have to be a professional race car engineer. Amateurs do it all the time. I think that it's easy to get stuck down a path, and it's important to take a step back and look at the whole view again.
Well, yeah. So I think you've opened up a couple of cans of questions that I had, but because you've already started off with, you talked about, do you have, even in the simulation world, do you know the aero package for the car? Do you have the tire data? All of these things influence your decision and how your car is behaving through the suspension at times, right? So it's not, you could be kicking and screaming that your car is pushing. Okay. That's what all front wheel drive cars do. Okay. We all complain about it. But if you you have to take the whole picture into account when you start making those decisions, right? And then you make that decision and you have to have that process. You have to go, okay, I made this change because, and this was my net result. If you go, I'm going to make this change, I'll give you a perfect example. Okay, my car. The internet says you have to run a really high rear spring rate, really front soft spring rate, and if you're still pushing, stiffen the bar up. I stiffen the bar up, still pushing. When you stiffen the bar up, the internet says go way up on your spring rate and see what happens. I went way up on my spring rate, still pushing. Everyone claims, oh my gosh, not possible. You should be spinning, as soon as you try to warm the car up. It should just spin coming right off out of the, false grid. It could never hook up with those kinds of spring rates, but it pushed and it pushed and it pushed. And so everyone was like, oh, that can't possibly be it. But then when I went the opposite direction, my push went away. And so you have to have that, in my opinion. But it's very layman for us, right? We're amateur road racers. Yes, we have the fingertip, the YouTube, all the YouTube scientists at our fingertip, all the math. There's plenty of ways to do the math now. Everybody's got a calculator for spring rates and how to calculate your sway bars and all this stuff, right? There's even free kinematic software out there, okay? You can do this, but you have to have that problem solving. If you keep going in the one direction where the voice says you need to go, but it's still not netting that result, you can't keep going that way, right? And you have to look at something
Certainly.
different.
And I think with a lot of chassis, there's more than one optimal point on the setup map.
Mm-hmm.
It's tangential. I'll tell a story. I was at Daytona at the 24, and I was working with a team that had JRZs on the car, and the crew chief slash engineer was more experienced with Penske shocks.
Okay.
And they had called me in after a practice session and said, listen, this thing's awesome, but I need a revalve because, we're full soft. We're getting over the bumps really well. It's just gliding. I need a little bit more in the adjustment range. Okay, no problem. Let me go count your shocks down. And as I'm doing this, it's occurring to me that one of the differences between JRZs and Penske's is that they adjust in opposite directions. So full soft on a Penske is full stiff on a JRZ.
Mm.
If you turned it the same,
Direction,
counterclockwise.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So they had wound the high speed compression up, but they're absorbing the bump. Right? Like they're dissipating that bump energy. And, the way the JRZs work, they kind of led themselves to that in that situation. Nothing against the Penske's, which are excellent in pretty much every way. But they work, at that higher level of high speed in certain applications, but it's counterintuitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, circling back to, what the internet says is, oh, if it's bad on the bumps, you soften it up. That's not always the case. There's different ways to approach the problem from a technical perspective that'll give you better results. I mean, I can't count how many engineers I know, myself included, that have gone to the shaker rig their first time and chased the grip number and walked out of the building feeling like a genius, gone to the track and had the driver get on the radio like, "What is this? What have you done to my car? It's awful. It's flopping. I can't drive the thing, right? But
Right.
mathematically, you've got this grip number." But I've thrown the baby out with the bathwater because I've ignored all of these other factors that contribute to on-track performance.
For sure.
So, you, so I think it's kind of important. Again, like I encourage people to work that loop,
Hmm.
right? Like try some stuff, see what works, try to figure out why. And sometimes I think you just try something a little different, right? Get a new data point. If it's worse in different ways, fine. Change one thing at a time. But like you did, like, you know what? I'm going to take a big swing at this. I'm going in this direction. I'm getting the same or worse or marginally better result. I'm just going to see where else I am on the map. And a lot of cars can do that. And I think that an interesting thing is that tire technology, even in the last, 10 years,
Oh man.
certainly in the last 30, right, has come such a long way. The way that you can load the tires completely different. Um, you don't necessarily know, where you are in the curve of, let's say load versus maximum grip, what that ratio is. As your conventional wisdom would say, all right, let's say I've got a 50-50 weight distribution car. I've got the same tire front and rear, right? And this is where my spring and bar equation comes from, right? You can kind of boil it down to percent front roll force, like how much percentage of the roll is the front carrying. And in that, square linear car, it's pretty easy to say, all right, well, I stiffen the rear bar, I'm going to have some more oversteer. Of course, within like kind of the linear range of the tire's performance. But on track, you're mostly in the nonlinear part. You're at more of the extremes, and the way that these tires can handle load has just evolved so much. And certainly conventional wisdom still applies, right? It's just physics, but what parameter are you adjusting and what's its performance curve? So then, test that conventional wisdom and make sure that, your assumptions actually match up with what happens.
So that's the thing, right? At some point, and I think we're all very different. Okay. Thanks to the podcast, I have resources I can reach out to, right? Some people just have connections. Somebody likes their car, they meet you, right? You come by and say, "Hey, you have JRZs on there, sweet," and you guys start talking. They can come talk to you a little bit, right? Other people, we make connections. I say this a lot on this podcast that motorsports is all about relationships, and moving it forward is all about a relationship, right? You find
Agreed.
you find sponsors that way. You find advancements in your chassis development and your race car development overall that way. It's all about the relationships you build. But at some point, each one of us hits a wall, right? And we go, I've done all I know how to do. All my resources have been tapped, and we're all sort of scratching our heads or something, right? We all have different levels, and we go, I need help. To you, at what point do we as amateurs need to reach out for help from a professional engineer?
I would say two cases. One, when you're just mired, right? Like you're in the woods and you're like, I don't know. What do I do with this thing? Um, that's number one. And number two is when you're ready to start working the process. I think that there's a lot of people that say, fast people do it as much as slow people do, but I just drive around it.
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're leaving it on the table. If you're just driving around it, sure, you're in the middle of a race. What are you going to do? You drive with, what you got. Your green flags waved. It's time to go. But from a perspective of development, that's a major hindrance to progress. Critique it, work the process. And I think in the first case, when it's I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, that's somebody that's already started working the process on their own.
I I think
You know,
even the drive around person will have worked the process they know to a certain amount, right? And that's what I'm trying to get at.
you
We
would
all
be shocked at how many people just set it in the middle and drive the thing.
I mean, I may or may not be guilty of that, or may have not been guilty of that. When I first got this car, I set everything to the middle. We drove out. We turned, one side of the knobs at a time, and we kept driving. And I was like, this thing is doing nothing. I don't feel nothing. But the car was also, it felt like complete garbage altogether. So no matter how much shock I threw at it, it wasn't behaving at all. But
100%. I mean, mess with your treble and bass all you want, but if the volume's turned all the way down, like
yes,
you're not going to get anything out of that.
you're right. Absolutely not. You're not going to get squat out of it. I get it. But that's some people. That's all they know, right? And I know a couple of guys that they're reaching the end of their knowledge loop. Not just their knowledge loop, but they're done making laps of the process, right? They don't think they can survive more laps of the make the change, note what happened, was it good or bad? Doesn't matter because feedback's feedback, and then let's keep going, right? Without a breath of fresh air. And some of them are running newish cars that not very many people run at the amateur level. Some people have run at the professional level. And then others are in cars that are well established, but they can't get the car the way they like it. And yes,
Yeah. And
in
that's a great point. I think that that's something that I'm a big proponent of. The car should suit you. At the amateur level, confidence is way faster than the optimal setup.
that, yeah, I can't say that. That's so important. Like it's confidence. It's not worth half a second. Okay, you can't really put a time frame on it on track, except for the peace of mind, right? If now as a driver in the skill level, in the moment you have to drive around it. Okay, God forbid there's a door to door and you knock some toe out, right? Drive around it. You're in the moment. I've body contact. Nothing on my car changed except for some dents, okay? I couldn't drive around it mentally, right? Something I had to work on. But if it's a toe issue or a camber issue, you'll drive around it in the moment, but that's not a way to take every weekend, in my opinion. So,
No. No, and when you give somebody confidence, they drive a little bit, they brake a little bit deeper, they carry more speed through the center, they pick the throttle up earlier, they'll use more track space, they'll look further ahead on the racetrack when they're driving, and they'll pick up time that way.
mhm.
And what inspires confidence in one driver may terrify another and vice versa. So for me, I think that it's great to have a well-established car as a baseline. You go on and say, okay, well, I've set up lots of X car and this is the spring and shock package and alignment you should start with. And people can drive really well with that, and they can go faster adjusting that to suit them.
Mhm. I you know, my big thing is right now there's there are fast people and there are not as fast people. I won't say anybody's slow that's out there, right? They're all within some area of evolution of their car, themselves as a driver, and they're all chasing down that fast person. Sometimes the fast person got lucky in their circle of car development and driver development, right? Sometimes they worked extra hard. Some of them continue to work extra hard every day. And I think when you're starting to lose doubt in yourself and your own process, I think that's a big time to go look for outside help. Even if it's, especially with the suspension stuff, tuning of the suspension, development of the car in general, reaching out to an engineer. I think it's important because, like you said, the confidence is a big thing, but at the amateur level, we're doing it all. We're developing the
Mm-hmm.
car. We're developing the driver. We're doing all the math on our own, right? Look, I do math every day. Sometimes it's wrong. Okay. Sometimes it's wrong. Something I did 6 months ago, and I'm operating under the thought process that it's still right. And for 6 months, I've
Mm-hmm.
been spinning my wheels. Okay. It happens. Okay. It's in my opinion, it's just one of those things that can happen. Maybe you have to take a step back and double check, but maybe you need a professional to double check it for you. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, if you have a lot of reps, right, like you've been doing it professionally, you have a lot of understanding of the ins and outs, it's just easier to see where the opportunity is. You know, go to, have an interior designer come to your house, right? Go to the doctor, go talk to the golf pro about your golf swing. Right? You watch all the YouTube you want, and then you go to the golf pro and they're like, bro, put your foot over there just a little bit. And pow, right? And it's this huge difference
Right.
because they've seen it a billion times. And they get you set on your basics and you get results.
So,
So I think that, for the amateur racer, when it's time to reach out, I think you said it pretty well. So you've kind of exhausted that path on your own.
so let's talk about how do we approach this conversation. There's a couple of services out there, right? There's professional drivers who are engineers who also do it. So how do we approach this conversation? Because I know you've done it trackside, engineering for other people. I don't know how often you've done it for a true amateur, but an amateur team may have reached out. And then what can we expect once we have this conversation?
So for me, it's typically, and like a lot of this, is coming from my career at JRZ, where it's, I've sold a set to somebody, one of the shops or teams, they put it on a client car, and you get this phone call. All right, hey, Brian, I'm at Road America, and I've just got a lot of understeer. All right. And it's a 30-45 minute consult, right? You're gathering this information. All right, well, what springs you got on the thing? What tires you have? What pressure are they at? How do they look? What's your wear? Um, where the bar's set? What's it like outside? How are you working the brake? Do you have any data? Do you have any video? Let me see how you're driving it. Let me see how this thing's moving around. Like, you're gathering information. Um, and you gather the information, and once you kind of get to that point, just like giving the doctor your medical history, right, run a couple of tests, and oh, all right, well, you know let's try some front compression. Like, oh, hey man, that really woke it up. And a lot of the times it's kind of a counterintuitive adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
um, but realistically, you're just getting somebody kind of back in the window, right? It's easy to see when the front's a little soft, and knowing that it's not really about the roll balance, it's about the dynamic balance of the brakes. Okay, I just need a little bit of, yaw off the front, but I don't need it in the middle of the corner. Um, and I don't want to turn it into a ramble, but I think the word understeer is too broadly applied. where it comes in, where it comes from, does it persist? Does it turn into snap oversteer? These are all things that kind of help you adjust that, really broad, stroke of understeer into a specific issue that you can then tackle.
Yeah, we tend to throw around the term and not identify where it is or what, or get specific with it, right? So, are you having front traction issues leaving the corner, entering the corner, mid corner, wherever it is, right? Is it only in the slow stuff? Is it only in the high speed stuff? And then you have to evaluate where it's happening, how it's happening, what track they're at, because some tracks have this like weird crown at certain corners, things like that will inherently be like you have to enter a little differently because
Oh, totally. And don't get me started on the diff either, right? Like, oh, I've got an open diff. I've got some ultra lock thing. I've got a Drexler that, so and so built, but I also have been running it for 10 years, and the friction plates look like porcelain.
but
And that's such a huge influence on, the as I call it, it's kind of the yaw moment, but just the understeer oversteer balance dynamically under braking and under power that the spring and shock doesn't really have a ton to do with. Um, and those things have to be harmonious.
yeah, so ironically, I had my OS Geiken sent to them for repair and tuning. And so I get a phone call from OS Geiken, and it's like, what's your power level? What's your weight? What size tires are you running? We went through the whole gambit, and they go, what's your complaint? Like, what are you having issue with? And I was like, I can't put power down from apex to exit like I feel everyone else can. Okay. I haven't figured out the turn in, but as far as the Geiken goes, I think it's the exit out, right? And he goes, oh, well, we're going to evaluate it. We'll take it in consideration. He calls me back later. He goes, hey, this is what's broken in it. Inside it, this is what's broken. The housing was broken. He goes, so we have to repair it, but your settings should be good. He goes, how long have you owned this? And I said, well, I've owned the car for 4 years, and the diff's been in the car for 8 years. And he goes, we have no record of fixing this or repairing it ever. So 8 years, basically, this car's had this diff in there, and it's never been serviced. It's never been looked at. And I decided this year I need to look at it, right? It's part of
Totally.
it's all part of the
And those
equation.
things go away like vision. It's a shock typically, right, doesn't just it's working great like it came from the factory and spouted oil and now it's just not working at all, right? Very similar for especially like a rampant plate style, differential. Over time they wear.
Mm-hmm.
And over time the performance degrades little by little and you get used to it, day after day, weekend after weekend. If you could, drive the thing brand new and drive the thing 5 years in, you'd certainly notice it instantly. But it takes that level of time, and I've watched people tune around that kind of wear. Heck, I've done it myself. Where you take a step back and wait, when's the last time these things were worked on?
Mm-hmm.
4 years ago. Oh my God! All right, send those to me. Right? Shaft bearings are blasted, oil dirty and old, gas and oils in the reservoir. Hang on, we're not doing springs, we're not making a subframe, we're not doing some dramatic change because that's not the problem, right? Basic maintenance.
Yeah.
And boom, car's woken up.
And but this is where the experience comes from, right? So maybe your car has old sphericals on it. So you guys as engineers have gone through the whole thing and you're like, what is going on? I don't understand. And then you guys go into the data and go, well, this seems like there's some kind of weird toe curve or something, right? This is what I normally see when I see a bad toe curve issue. And then you go look in the corner, right? Or this is what I see with worn shocks or a bad diff or a combination, because invariably there's combinations of things that are going to happen, right? And your years of experience are what help people trail things down or track things down. And I think that's a big deal when it comes to getting that help, right? We all try to stay on top of our cars as best we can. But obviously, when I bought this car, I probably should have pulled the diff and had it serviced. That way I knew exactly when, right? But if it was still working, I was like, okay, but how well was it working?
Yeah.
You know,
You got 1,000 other things to do.
I had it. I did. I bought an autocross car and decided I was going to turn it into a Honda Challenge car, right? Like I had lots of things going on when I built it.
Yeah.
But
And it's hard. I mean, amateur racing, like you're there by yourself, or you got a couple of buddies, or maybe a prep shop, or, it's okay, fine. You've got a whole team. That's a different story, right? But even then, you get the thing prepared and you're still busy. You got the driver's meeting, going to get fuel, taking pressures. Oh, my aim cable's not working, right? My dash is disconnected, whatever.
mm-hmm.
Some random thing that you're chasing down. It's difficult to stay on top or, focus on one area. Like, all right, well, what's my setup? Is my setup good enough? Can I improve session to session, day to day, and get the most out of my weekend?
Yeah, we're always running as amateurs. I can't tell you how many guys show up to the racetrack and the car's not actually done yet, right?
Oh my God, totally.
I mean, I know there's not pro cars, but even teams show up and they're still working on their stuff. I mean, it's amateur of amateurs, the Lemons race guys. Like there's rumors of them having mechanics in a trailer as they tow it down the road to finish fixing something on a Lemons
I have
guy.
seen transmissions in the hotel bathtub.
So yes, it happens, right? Like we get it. It's when you can get your stuff together, but you still can't figure it out. That's when I think you need to go get the help, right?
I agree.
So I stumbled
I
upon
think anytime's a good time, personally.
anytime.
Anytime's a good time. It's not one of those like, oh, let me go spend 10 grand and get this guy out here for a week. And like sometimes it helps just to like get a perspective, get a direction. Hey, I just built this thing. Here's what I've got on it. What do I do? Why don't you try this and this? Right? Like I think that you can accelerate the loop at any point in the development path.
Mm-hmm. I would 100% agree with that, because any educated outside influence on your race program, specifically in the car development world, is going to automatically speed it up. You might have gotten there in 3 years, where this person can get you there in 3 sessions, 3 events, somewhere quicker than what you are.
It's a lot of time, tire, and tears saved.
That's true. And the tire bills are not getting any cheaper.
Oh my God, seriously.
No.
It's crazy how much tires are now.
Oh yeah, it's going to get worse. So, okay. So anytime is probably the right time, especially in my opinion, if it's weighing on you. So that's the other thing. You have enough to worry about if you're like, I want to get faster, or I need to work this car, and you're just getting frustrated, and maybe that you're looking at quitting, or it's ever popped up, hire somebody to help, because you didn't pour all this time and money into it just to give up on it. There's times to give up, but it's not when it beat you down, So hire somebody.
Totally. And you know what? This is supposed to be fun.
Yes.
Right? Like that's the and that's the double whammy of it, right? Like I'm gonna buy this car, I'm gonna go race with my buddies, and it's gonna be awesome. And then you've spent all this time and money, and the car's not working that well, and now you're not having fun at what was supposed to be naturally fun anyway.
Yep. So the funny thing about all of this in our conversation today is that it started because I misread your website, sort of. Okay. So the 057 Motorsports website, it has this thing called Trackside. And I was like, sweet, he offers trackside service. And I reached out before I clicked on that link. Okay. And then I clicked on the link after I had already reached out. And I was like, this is even better. So let's talk a little bit about that trackside offering that you at 057 are offering these days.
Yeah, happy to. I think that, for me, it was when I started 057 and I'm selling and servicing the shocks. I've got this day job and I was working with some people and we're just kind of thinking like we should develop our own product, right? Like you have your business, you want to do something that has impact. And I think for me and a lot of others, it was how do I help my clients better, faster, right? More access, quicker in terms of when do I get an adjustment. And it kind of came down to the fact that, in my career was always that, right, that 45-minute conversation. Well, what car do you have? What's on it? Where are you? How's it feel? What's it doing? And Trackside was a app that was developed to kind of shorten that loop and make it efficient, where if myself or somebody else, and there's two sides to it. We have Trackside, which is like the racer side, and we have Cal Tools, which is like the professional side, where you can kind of view racer reports. So racers get into Trackside, you put in your car, what's on it, go to the alignment shop, you get your alignment, tap that in there, count your shock settings, put that in there. You go out on track, it captures like, hey, all right, I rode America today, captures, date, time, temperature, right? I'm really struggling, carrying speed through 3. I can't break into 7, the kink, I feel like I'm gonna die. I saw my ancestors there last session. What do I do? But then once I have that in front of me, right? You ding me, hey, what do I do?
Mm.
I can flip open Cal Tools. I look at it, I'm like, a little bit of front rebound, right? And it's just like that because we've spent a lot of the time up front gathering that information, and I wanted to make a tool that myself or any other professional could use to quickly distribute that help,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and at a cheap way. So it's oh, I don't have 1,000, 2,000, $5,000 to get an engineer out next to me, but I've got a couple $100, right? It's much less than one tire, and it's a heck of a lot more of time than one tire.
Mm-hmm.
Both on the track and in terms of how much you'd have to spend on your own to figure that out. Uh, so it's taken some years to put together, kind of bootstrapping the thing. We just have it now on the iPhone's test flight as a public beta. Um, with people inquire for interest, we send them the link and we get them on there. We just added a free mode, no subscription required to at least use it and, give us feedback. It's a project, for me, I think it's always going to be in development.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but as of now, it's a very usable tool, a very useful tool that I'm using for my clients, and some other people are starting to use for theirs. That allows us to, again, kind of quickly give you good insight, good changes.
So say I sign up, okay, and then I use the service a half dozen times, okay, each time at a different track, and I'm coming back to another track and I go, oh, I'm going to make that same change. conditions are similar, or maybe the conditions aren't similar. I don't know, but I'm going to make that same change and start it as my blank. And I come back to you guys when you're using the app. Is it collecting historical data?
Yeah. So there's two main kind of sets of data. There's the calibration
Mm-hmm.
and the session.
Okay.
And the calibration is the setup on the car, kind of at that time. And then the session is what happened with it, right? I was out on track. I did this lap. It felt like this. Do I want to associate some data or video with it? And we named it calibration because to me, the setup is such a, the way that I think people state it, setup is such a solid, you know, non-moving entity. It's not dynamic, you know. And to me, calibration is dialing something for that specific set of circumstances. This car, this driver, this day,
Mm-hmm.
all of which are big variables, in and of themselves, and then getting it right. I think that you could take somebody, let's say I've worked with for 5 years, and you look at how the car was set up at Road Atlanta, year after year after year after year, and it's evolved because they have too. And if you took the 5 year setup and put it on the 1 year car, wait, no stability, right? You give it to that driver at that time, he's like, I'm going to die. I can't brake. I can't turn in with this.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, we've built confidence and a tactile sense of how we can control that, how we brake with it, how we turn it in, so that I don't need the stability to give me confidence because I've learned how to carry that speed and hand off from the brake to the wheel. But I got that confidence by having the stability first to allow me to challenge myself in that area of the track.
Yeah, I'm big on I call it more of like a stair step, right? So I get the car handling more to where I want it to be. I get more confidence and I push myself, and then the car comes up with something. In my case, it always pushes. Okay, we always have that big push problem. The faster I go, the more it wants to push. Then we do a little more change. It gets more comfortable. I get more, or the car gets more comfortable to drive. I get a more aggressive, and I come out with another issue, right? And you're just evolving with the car.
Absolutely. And that's why we kind of called it calibration,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a dynamic phrase. I always felt like setup was a little static, right? You go on the forums, what's the setup for this car? Like, oh yeah, you get some motons and these spring rates and you set them here. Probably a decent starting point,
Right.
but certainly not, what's going to be best for you, within your circumstance at that, given date, time, and your experience level and all the other things. And oh, now this brake package is legal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I've got a much more, let's say, aggressive rear pad. I've got much more modulation on the front. I don't need the help of the front sway bar any longer. So, okay, let's go ahead and take that out. Let's balance a little bit of rear spring with it. Now we've got some more options. Let's get a little bit lower with the car, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you're still doing the work because that's always changing. Oh, tire manufacturer changes compound, changes construction, tire sponsor changes. You're right back to it.
Yeah, that's a big one for us. It's not this. It's a different tire, same sponsor, right? So we went from the Toyo RR to the new Proxy R. Okay, supposedly faster. It's definitely constructed differently. But we're all learning right now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But roll balance is optimal. What camber is optimal?
yep.
How much overall roll, is optimal? How much damping can the thing withstand? I mean, some tires, they don't really tolerate very much low speed damping at all.
Mm-hmm.
Some you can really wind it in there and get grip from it.
So through the app, I could put in every event. I'm going to this event. This is my baseline. Session 1. Nothing occurs. I don't necessarily need help because it's okay for the conditions and everything. The next day occurs. It's now 20 degrees hotter, and I go out for practice and it's oversteering like crazy. Can I then re-enter my baseline or use my baseline and say, hey, this session it went crazy and here's the changes, and then get help?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
That's generally that's the entire purpose of it is let me efficiently capture that information, in a way that's easy for the driver to enter, and then hit a button that says like answers, give me.
okay. And now,
Because like you said, like racers don't have a ton of time, right? Like
none.
I got 3 minutes, you know, practice is an hour. I got 3 minutes. Like they want, like I think that was one of the things that was real educational for me in the damper world was like that's the easiest one to make, right? It's the easiest thing to do. Walk up and do a couple of clicks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to jack it up. I don't have to do springs. I don't do ride height. Go back to the scales, whatever. So I think a lot of my experience was kind of based in making quick and efficient shock adjustments, and then certainly others where I could. But the philosophy of the app is kind of centered around that, which is I need help quickly and clearly so that I can go faster and, get the information that I need to give you that answer at that speed.
Yeah, and so through the app, I think that process anyway, it seems like I can go, I need help, right? My baseline's already set. I'm having problems. Here are the current conditions. Need help with XYZ. Send.
Yep,
Then you can go review your data, do whatever you need to do, and then you can come back and go, oh, I have a response. I need to change XYZ on the car, or address XYZ, and then provide feedback, right? So we go, make the
exactly.
quick change, go do your session. Hopefully it's better. You say it's better, but it needs more, or it's doesn't need as much, right? Or something else is occurring. Okay. And then you can get additional help and really start dialing it in. And I think that's kind of important because in our day, we don't want to be on the phone for 45 minutes. Lord knows I've been on the phone trying to find parts before. Okay. You know how many times I've had to put the guy on the parts counter on hold because I've had to do something else or talk to somebody or do, you're always running around. So when you can press send and wait for it to come back with like a push notification, you should be good to go. It'll be
Yep.
immensely helpful in my opinion. But um, what are so? What is the cadre manning the backside for you guys? Is it just you? Is it other engineers in a pool? Is it engineers interfacing with their specific clients? How does it all work?
It's a little bit of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got myself primarily, I've got some engineers I work with when capacity requires. But as far as like the business model of the thing is concerned, you can just get yourself a pro license and you can service whoever you want. I'm not involved at all.
Mm-hmm. So as an engineer, you could get an engineer pro license to the app and then run your clientele through that service.
Precisely. I think, from a broad perspective, I'm building a road to carry my cargo,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to build this nice straight road where I can carry a lot of cargo down, and those are my clients, but I'm adding lanes for everybody else to do their thing because there's way, way more me's and heck, certainly smarter ones, right, that are out there that can help a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
with different experience sets, different, parts of the sport,
Right.
different platform expertises. And I'm, feel very strongly about continuing to build a product that serves our part of the industry and makes it, again, like we talked about it earlier, fun. It should be fun to go to the track. It's not fun to have a car that doesn't handle, that's not fun to drive, that's not confidence inspiring. It's no fun.
Yeah.
And I want to make it cheap enough so that it stays fun. It shouldn't cost, you know, 20 grand a year, 30 grand a year, 100 grand a year to get that kind of help.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, if you got it, you can, but most amateurs don't, right? Their race budgets are limited,
Exactly.
and it would be something they do learn and plan into their race programs and budgeting. But if it's something to explore, right? If you know you're running out of rope and how you're going to measure and evaluate your car, maybe you start planning this now for the rest of the year or 2026 or, so.
Oh, 100%. And, I think that we're seeing some driver coaches use it too, right? It's not just for the chassis side.
Mm-hmm.
It's also for, the driver coach side where, you can enter in turn by turn feedback as a racer, and your coach can look at that and be like, okay, listen, I see you're doing this here, that there, that there. Here's your areas to focus on. And the way that it networks, they can or cannot, up to them and their client, pull an engineer in and say, listen, here's where we're at with the driving side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this driver, here's his car. We've got him dialed in on what to do, but I need you to give him more rear grip. What do you think? Try that. Right. And we can, kind of interface with the coach directly. You can interface with both. I think a lot of the time, in the motorsports world, everyone's got their speed secrets,
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to me to not step on those toes. I'm building a wrench. I am not taking everybody's torque spec.
Yeah. And so that's another good thing to talk about for both the engineer side or the coach side and then the driver's side. Both of them are clientele, and they could be using this app to interface with each other, right, in a metered way. But there's privacy going on with it, right? Your setup is your setup, right? The help you're getting is for you, not necessarily publicized to the world. Some people think that everything you put out on the internet stays there. This is not the internet per se. So
Exactly. It's all kind of compartmentalized, right? I think it's very similar to many other professional services,
mm-hmm.
right? Where you've got to have your code of ethics, right? Like your doctor, your lawyer has handled, X amount of cases relevant to yours. I've handled, X amount of Corvettes, so I kind of generally know, all right, here's the range, right? Spring, shock, power tire, whatever, different modifications. And it informs you of a good direction, but it's not that you're going to copy paste because that's just not, professionally ethical. And I think that that's a very important point, and the people that are successful, right? They stick to that.
Mm-hmm.
You have your knowledge base, but you compartmentalize your client's individual information.
Yeah, that's absolutely important. It's imperative. So I just wanted to reiterate that for folks, that they understand that it is compartmentalized and that it's not getting out there. I mean, you can put it out there if you want, but it won't be put out by anybody else. So
yeah, don't be screenshotting.
Everybody's got that that screenshot click on their iPhone mastered by now, I'm sure. So
oh, totally. But you know what? It happens with the paper setup sheet too.
Oh yeah. It gets lost. Clipboards, man, you know how many clipboards get left at hot pits for at least a session.
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine. I mean, I see it all the time, but I mean, I can only imagine the kind of stuff that if you were nefarious enough or it was that competitive that you could go find out. So, um, Bryan, where can we find the Trackside app and 057 Motorsports?
So right now it's 057motorsports.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way to reach us. When you sign up for the app there, it's the web app available. But you shoot us a message, we'll get you the public link. I think we're probably, I don't know, I would say 3 to 6 months, right, from just putting it on the app store.
Okay.
I'm kind of in that phase, and yeah, I could be a bit of a perfectionist about it, right? But I'm in a phase now where we're working with clients, we're getting feedback, and we're kind of understanding, like, what's good about the core feature set we have and what's next. And then when we have a level of comfort there, because I think as a developer, right, it's my first time developing
Mm-hmm.
software or an app. um you want to have that level of comfort that when it goes out, you are confident that people are really going to like it. It's important to me that it's a useful tool. um but shoot us a message, we'll send you the public link. um and then look for it on the app store in the summer.
Awesome. I think it'd be a good time to get it, dip your toe in, especially when it goes live this summer, see what it's all about, and then see how you want to apply it specifically, maybe towards the end of the year, if it's coming out in the summertime, depending on what people's schedules are still like. But specifically, like go full tilt in 2026 because there's no time like the present, right? So it comes out, you start dipping your toe, you start making those connections with folks. Maybe there's an engineer you find on the app that you prefer, and then really make a plan and start executing in 2026. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's we're working now, and I think that next year is going to be a big year for it,
yeah.
as it really kind of blossoms into that full feature set where everything's easy. Like a lot of it's manual right
Hmm.
now. um and then understanding how to automate it, that's been the challenge. Exactly what I think is intuitive for racers, because they don't have a lot of time.
Right.
In a way, it's like you want to enable somebody to mash buttons quickly and provide the information that a professional needs to help them effectively. That was the biggest update we made before we put it, onto the iPhone off the web app,
Hmm.
was simplifying the way drivers gave input. And I think that that's been a huge leap in, allowing us to help clients. So, this summer, I'm very excited to be working in it and, you know, continuing to help people. It's thawing out here in Illinois. So, a lot of the local stuff's getting going. Um, so the clients are getting back out there, and we're getting more sessions coming in and more stuff to do. So, yeah, this summer, even now, I think people that are ready to work, please get in contact and keep an eye on it, because we'll be, kind of posting a little bit more. I've been quiet on social media recently,
Hmm.
the last couple of years with as crazy of things have been. And that's a goal of mine, this year, to get out there a little bit more and start providing, just good insight, useful things to everybody through our social channels.
Awesome, man. One left field question for you. What is your best advice for an amateur racer struggling with their suspension?
Turn it up till it really sucks.
Okay. All the knobs.
Start all the way soft. I mean, and this isn't my idea. This was published by Carroll Smith in like the late 70s by the founder, and it was a quote from the founder of JRZ himself, Jan,
Hmm.
and it was their basic procedure for setup. Started all the way soft, work the compression up until it gets a little bit too skippy on the bumps, dial it down a bit, work the rebound up till you have good control. You're probably at a good starting point. And I think so many people stick it in the middle and run it there. Like, you know what? No, go full soft and turn it up till it sucks. Turn it back a little bit.
Yeah, and just so you know, 057motorsports.com has a handful, 6 or so articles, I think, that you have up there. And one of them is, so you bought some shocks, what to do now. It's worth a read. Go check that out for sure, too, because he's out there providing advice, not just the application and not just engineering services or shock rebuilds. So he is handing out some stuff.
And please feel free to ask me more questions. I think what I'm looking for now is, give me some good topics. I'm starting to write again, so, ask the questions and I'll start answering them.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure, sir. Anything else we need to cover tonight?
I could go on about this kind of stuff for hours.
Right.
So I suppose now's as good a time as any, but I'm always happy to come back on if people have different questions and want me to cover different things. I just, for me, it's interesting. And I think that from a business perspective, an educated customer is a good customer, right? So the more I can do to help get people educated and point them in the right direction, the faster they go, the more things they need, the more opportunities there are for, myself and others to be of value. So I'm always happy to continue doing it.
Yeah, and the educated customer provides the educated feedback to solve the problem, right? So it will help in the long run make the adjustments that much faster, that more, determined to get things faster. So it's been a pleasure, sir. I really appreciate you coming on this evening.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. I'm always grateful to be able to come out and just meet cool people and have interesting conversations. So you guys let me know anything you need. We're out here.
Yeah, and you can hit me up at the Blind Apex Podcast at gmail.com if you need me to pass anything on or if you want him to come back on. And then hit him up at the 057motorsports.com. Thanks again, sir.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep working on yourself, keep working on the car, and let's get faster.